Let me ask you something honest, Dot. When was the last time you did something purely for yourself, not to impress anyone, not hoping it would get noticed, not quietly calculating how it might change the way someone sees you, just something you wanted for no other reason than that you wanted it, Dot? If you had to think about that for more than a few seconds, this is for you. Because somewhere along the way, a lot of men learned the wrong lesson about what it means to care about someone. They learned that love is measured in sacrifice, that devotion is proved through availability, that the more you give up of yourself, the more valuable you become to someone else. And that lesson, however well-intentioned, is quietly destroying them. Here's what actually happens when you make someone else the center of your world. You disappear from your own life. Not gradually, not over months. Almost immediately, you start shaping your opinions around what she might think of them. You stop pursuing goals that don't somehow circle back to her attention. Your plans become conditional. Your moods become dependent. You're still physically present, still waking up, still going through the motions, but mentally, emotionally, you've vacated your own existence and taken up residence in hers. You've become a satellite, always circling, never landing. And here's the brutal truth about satellites. Nobody thinks about them. They're just there, background infrastructure. You notice a satellite the moment it stops doing its job, not while it's working perfectly. That's what happens to men who give too much too fast without any sense of their own value. They become infrastructure. Reliable, functional, invisible. And they cannot understand why the person they're working so hard for doesn't seem to see them the way they want to be seen. I want to be clear about something before we go further, because this conversation often gets hijacked by the wrong ideas. This isn't about manipulation tactics. It's not about making her miss you by performing indifference or engineering distance. The internet is full of that advice, and it doesn't work, not because the psychology is wrong, but because it's built on a rotten foundation. You can't fake your way to genuine self-respect, and you can't perform your way into real attraction. What I'm talking about is something much simpler and much harder at the same time. It's about actually building a life worth living, a life so full, so purposeful, so grounded in who you are and what you value, that no single person's approval determines your emotional weather. That's not a tactic. That's a complete reconstruction of how you see yourself. So why do good men end up in this position? It's rarely stupidity. It's rarely weakness, at least not in the way we usually think of it. It usually starts with something that actually looks like strength, dedication, commitment, the willingness to prioritize someone you care about. The problem isn't the caring. The problem is the surrender. Because there's a version of caring that keeps you whole. You show up, you're present, you're invested, but you maintain your own ground. You have opinions, you have standards. You have a life outside of this relationship that gives you substance, that gives her something to connect with, that makes you interesting and challenging and worth figuring out. And then there's the version that quietly hollows you out. Every accommodation you make is a small concession to the idea that she matters more than you do. Every boundary you don't hold teaches her, without a word being spoken, exactly how much tolerance she has to work with. Every time you rearrange your schedule, cancel your plans, swallow your discomfort to keep the peace, you send a message. Not the one you intend, not "I love you." The message she receives, somewhere below conscious thought, is "My time is less valuable than yours. My comfort matters less, my needs can wait." And she adjusts accordingly. Not because she's cruel. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it genuinely isn't. But people treat you the way you teach them to treat you. And you've been a patient, thorough teacher. Here quotes, "What changes when you decide to stop? Not when you decide to play games. Not when you decide to manufacture distance or become artificially unavailable. When you genuinely decide that you matter, that your time has value, that the energy you bring to someone's life is worth something, that you are not a backup plan or a safety net or an emotional utility, and you are no longer available to be treated as one." When that shift happens, when it's real, not performed, everything around you responds to it. People can feel self-respect. It has a specific quality. It's not arrogance, which is loud and defensive and has the smell of fear on it. Real self-respect is quiet. It's the steadiness of someone who knows what they're about, who doesn't need the moment to go a certain way to feel okay about themselves. It's the energy of a man who has a life, and you can join it or not, but it's happening either way. That quality is genuinely rare. And rare is genuinely attractive. Now let's talk about what tends to happen next, not as a strategy, just as reality. When you stop chasing, when you genuinely redirect your attention toward your own life and growth, something shifts in the dynamic. The person who was comfortable in your orbit starts to notice the change. Not necessarily right away. At first there might be relief. Finally, the pressure is off. She can breathe. She doesn't have to manage your feelings anymore. But then time passes. A week, a month. maybe longer. And the absence you created by showing up fully for yourself starts to fill with questions. Memories surface, the things she had come to take for granted suddenly appear in a different light. The effort that seemed ordinary when it was always available now looks different in retrospect. This isn't manipulation working, this is just space working. You've given her room to actually feel something instead of spending all her emotional energy managing proximity to you. And one of two things happens. Either she comes back more genuinely, more attentively, with a recalibrated understanding of what she had, or she doesn't. And what she showed you by not coming back is information you needed. Not a verdict on your worth, information about whether this particular situation was ever going to give you what you actually wanted. Both outcomes are useful, only one of them hurts, but the one that hurts is also the one that frees you. I want to spend some time on that word freedom, because most men in this situation don't feel free. They feel stuck. They feel like they're waiting for something, a text back, a shift in her behavior, a sign that the investment they've made is going to pay off. They're not living their lives. They're holding their lives in suspension, waiting for someone else to make a decision that will determine whether they're allowed to feel good about themselves again. That's not love. That's hostage negotiation. And the thing you need to understand about that dynamic is that no one wins it, not you and not her. Because even if she comes back in that context, even if the text arrives, even if things reset, nothing has actually changed. The same pattern that created the problem is still in place. You're still defining your value by her responses. She's still holding that much weight in your emotional architecture. And the cycle continues. The only way out isn't to wait longer or harder or more strategically. The only way out is to actually leave. Not physically necessarily, but emotionally, psychologically. You have to genuinely, completely withdraw your sense of worth from her response to you. And to do that, you have to put that sense of worth somewhere else. Somewhere it actually belongs, in your work, your purpose, your relationships with people who consistently show up for you, your own daily experience of being alive and building something. Let's talk practically about what this looks like. You have something you've been putting off. You know what it is. The gym routine that keeps starting and stopping. The project you keep almost beginning. The friendship you've been neglecting because all your energy has been going one direction. The skill you've been meaning to develop. The version of yourself you can see clearly but keep failing to become because you're too busy waiting for someone else to tell you you're enough. Start there. Not as a tactic. Not to become more attractive by becoming a better looking prospect. But because that thing matters and you've been abandoning it and it's time to stop. Set a standard for how you expect to be treated. Not an announced standard. You don't need to deliver a speech or issue an ultimatum. Just a quiet internal line. When someone crosses it, you notice. When they repeatedly cross it, you respond. Not with anger or theatre, but with the calm acknowledgement that this isn't working for you and you're going to act accordingly. Be honest about what you actually want, not what you're willing to accept. Not the minimum viable version of the relationship that would technically qualify as having something. What do you actually want from a partner, from your life, from your time? Get clear on that, because if you're not clear on it, you'll keep accepting substitutes and wondering why you feel empty, and stop performing indifference while privately hoping she notices. That particular piece of advice, the go silent and wait for her to chase you strategy, only works when it's genuine, and when it's genuine, it's not a strategy anymore. It's just you actually being okay without her. And that's not a trick. That takes real work. Here quotes. What changes when you actually build it? You stop attracting people who take you for granted. Not because you've become harder to take for granted in some defensive, walls up way, but because you're no longer unconsciously selecting for people who feel like a challenge to win over, because winning them feels like it means something about your value. That pattern, chasing people who withhold, working to earn the approval of people who don't freely give it, is a pattern built on a core belief that you need to earn your place. And when you stop believing that, the pattern dissolves. You start attracting people who see you clearly, who appreciate the effort you bring because you're bringing it from fullness, not desperation, who match your energy because they have their own energy to bring, not because they're managing you, and you become genuinely capable of a different kind of relationship. One built on mutual respect rather than unequal investment. One where both people show up, where both people's needs matter, where neither person is pretending to care less than they do or performing more than they feel. That kind of relationship isn't the reward for learning the right tactics. It's the natural result of becoming a man who actually knows his worth. So let her miss you. Or don't, maybe she won't, and that's information too. But either way, do the work, reclaim your time. Not because absence creates attraction, though sometimes it does, but because your time is yours and you've been spending it on things that don't return the investment. Reclaim your energy, not as a negotiating tactic, but because there's a version of your life that deserves that energy and it's been waiting. Reclaim your self-respect, not to seem more attractive, but because you were always worth more than the role you've been playing and it's time you started acting like it. The version of you that does this work, the version that fills his own life, sets his own standards, moves forward with or without anyone's validation, that version doesn't need someone to choose him to feel like enough. He already knows he is. And here's the thing about a man who truly knows his worth. He stops measuring himself by whether any particular person comes back, because he understands at a level that doesn't waver that his value isn't determined by her decision. It never was. That realization changes everything. Not just how you relate to the person you've been hung up on, how you carry yourself in every room, how you hold yourself in every conversation, how you show up for every person in your life, including yourself. That's not a dating strategy. That's just becoming who you were always supposed to be. Start there. Everything else follows.